Let's rock.
Welcome to the Semi-Retired Podcast with your hosts, Richard Bonomo.
And me, Dave Farrant.
Hey, Dave, how you doing?
Doing great, Richard. Having a great week.
Good. Because this week we're talking robots.
Robot Overlords.
Before we go robots, though, I think you want to go postal.
Yeah, you're right, Richard. Thank you for saying that because I've got a couple of rants to unload here. And anybody who's been listening to the last few episodes will recall that I uncovered some cases of shrinkflation involving Kraft dinner, chicken wings, and hearty soup. Today's topic is a little more serious, and it has to do with not shrinkflation, but inflation. Let's face it, it's in the news every day, asking ourselves what's causing it. Is it the war in Ukraine? Is it global supply chains still not back in shape after the pandemic? Well, I've got two news articles that I'm going to, actually 2 or 3 news articles I'm going to quote from here. The first one is from a website called Truth Out, published at the end of October. And the headline is, "This is what price gouging looks like. Exxon profits break all-time record." Now, it's not just Exxon. I'm going to roll through a few numbers here. We're looking at second and third quarter of this year, year over year. ExxonMobil profits up 280%. Chevron up 277%. Conoco up a measly 146%.
Oh, come on. They're not even trying.
Not even trying. Exactly. Yeah. Not even trying. Barely gouging. They're barely breaking the skin. Phillips 66 up, a healthy 1,243%. Marathon Petroleum up 545%. This is profit over the prior year. Same period. Valero up 500%. And coming in at the top, somebody called PBF Energy at a 1,700% increase over prior year for the quarter. And all these profit numbers are in the billions. We've got 20 billion for Exxon, 11 billion for Chevron, 5 for Conoco, a couple more 5. So we're talking lots of money on the quarter here. While at the same time, somehow we're getting gouged at the pump. And you would think that with that kind of profit rolling in, it wouldn't be necessary to pass on the cost to us as much as is obviously taking place. Well, pass on the cost, paying the cost and again and again.
Oh, yeah. It's crazy in this time where a lot of people are actually working from home. Less people are driving, yet their profits are increasing like mad.
That's a good point.
Because they've raised the prices to get back at us.
I feel like that's it. I feel like it's a revenge move.
Yeah.
People aren't driving. Petty. Okay, we're going to charge you triple. It's fascinating. For anybody who's out there, all these figures are available on the internet. Didn't take a lot of digging to come up with them. Oh, and the other aspect
it's also available at the pump.
And I should point out that a couple of these players have been taking their profits and doing stock buybacks, a practice that was illegal until it was legalized, I think, by the Reagan administration in the U.S. at any rate.
Sounds about right.
And again, we're not just talking U.S. companies. I think I mentioned BP are in there as well. Maybe I didn't. BP, British Petroleum, posted $8.2 billion in profits for the quarter, second highest on record, with $2.5 billion going towards share buybacks that benefit investors. So fantastic. Along the same lines, another headline here, daylight robbery, Pfizer condemned for hiking U.S. COVID vaccine price by, wait for it, 10,000% above cost.
You said 10%, right?
I said 10,000%, and it's not a typo.
Were those thousands?
Those were thousands.
That's a lot of percents.
Never heard of such a thing. Vaccine equity campaigners last week condemned Pfizer for announcing that it will soon raise the price of its publicly funded, by the way, to the tune of $800 million. I looked that up. COVID-19 shot to between 110 and 130 a dose in the U.S. And I think the range is there, so they'll come in at 110 and it'll look like, could have been 130.
Like they dropped the price.
Dropped it. We went at the low end sort of thing. I spent my entire life in companies that would get excited, like extremely excited, with a 30% profit. Like 10,000%? I don't know what that is.
Don't let Apple find out. They'll raise the prices even more.
Can you imagine if we were paying 10,000% profit on, let's say on my Kraft dinner? How much would that Kraft dinner cost at a 10,000% markup? I can't even do the math.
You could only eat one noodle at a time. You'd have to really stretch it out.
I thought those 2 pieces of news were worth letting our audience know about. So it's, hundreds and thousands of % profit for the oil industry and 10,000 for Pfizer and the COVID-19 vaccine.
Craziness. I saw this tweet today, and they were showing the salaries of the big CEOs.
Yeah, don't get me started.
It's like 2002, Elon Musk was worth $2 billion. Today's worth $220 billion. And they show a bunch of these. And then they show the minimum wage in 2000 at the same time was $750, and today it is Still 750.
Still 750. Yeah. Well, I did this calculation once, if I can beg the audience's attention for another minute or so. It said that if you're in one of the Western countries, let's say Western Europe, Britain, Canada, US, whatever, and you work for 40 years at, say, $50,000 a year average salary, that's going to cover a lot of people. 50 years of 40, 40 years of 50, whatever. I think that's going to cover an awful lot of people. That's $2 million in gross salary earnings for your entire life. Pay income tax on that, let's say 30%. Now your $2 million, let's say, is down to 1.4 million for your whole life now. From the first day you walk into that job at McDonald's as a short order cook to when you retire doing God knows what. And then you got to pay sales tax every time you buy something. And people get by their whole life on that kind of money. And I think that gives you a sense of how much people are being paid when you hear these ridiculous numbers like so-and-so's making, I think the CEO of Pfizer, I saw this because I was looking, it was 24 million, or, media figures making in the tens of millions, CEO of some dollar store chain in the southern US, in this case, 11 million. You're talking 50 lifetimes of income in a year.
It's crazy.
It's I don't understand. It's irresponsible.
And they need more. Don't forget. They need to. I wonder if they sit at their big meetings and say, "Ha ha! This year I made 75,000 lifetimes this year, compared to the average Joe."
Well, there's the thing. That they're having painful meetings about like frontline employees, right? Can we afford a cost of living increase this year or whatever? And meanwhile, over there,
it's madness.
It's not. It's just not fair, Richard. Maybe call me naive. It's not fair.
We should all maybe hire robots.
Now there's an idea. There's a whole other rabbit hole, right?
There's a rabbit hole.
Replacing humans with robots.
If they could, they would, and they're already starting.
Of course they would.
And speaking of starting, this is what kind of threw this topic onto the table, if you will, was the introduction of a robot here in Montreal at a seniors home in an 8-week pilot project, I guess. Grace, the robot, is a robot developed by the Jerry Party Laboratory team, and it's going to be at one of the seniors' homes from one of our big hospitals here in Montreal, the Jewish General. And it's essentially a robot that will be a companion to seniors.
Yeah, you sent me this, and I my jaw hit the floor.
It's wild. I saw this the same day that I saw the trailer for Megan, the movie coming out.
Oh, yeah, which looks really good, by the way.
Which has like a companion for children who might be lonely. So they created, and I'm like, how can I see these two things on the same day? It's bizarre. And you look at this thing and it's got a head of, looks like a young woman, and the rest of it, it's got some sort of arms and a bit of a mechanical.
Yeah, you see the mechanical guts a bit, right?
Yeah,
in the picture?
Yeah, exactly. You can see its processor.
Yeah,
so it's not
processor,
lying.
Yeah.
So it's not lying.
And your processor is showing.
Yeah, so and there's a little video on the site, and you see the woman, and I love this. It's an older woman. She has a microphone, I guess, to communicate with the robot, and she asks it what its favorite movie is, and the robot answers back in a sort of semi-clipped robotic voice. I haven't seen many movies, but I do love me some Blade Runner. And I went, oh my God! Of all the
she
things
said that the robot said that. I do love me some Blade Runner.
I do love me some Blade Runner.
Here,
and I'm like, wow, this is freaking wild to pull a reference of a movie where we're not sure if the replicants are real or not,
and they weren't very happy, were they either? We'll get to that.
No, exactly, and to throw that in there is just wild.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah,
and the person comes on and says basically, we don't have enough staff to spend with some of the seniors. They need companionship, and so we thought we'd develop this. It's odd. It's like something you'd see in a movie, and in fact, it's happening here. I thought you see this thing is going to be somewhere in the States or another country somewhere, but to see it right here in Montreal, it's wild.
It really threw me. I think there's some quotes from the person running the seniors residence there saying, well, we're all so busy, for work, especially since the pandemic. The residents really seem to appreciate Grace, enjoy spending time with her. And I was kind of like, yeah, but it's a robot.
I know, it's wild. And we don't see in the video how much interaction it has, or can it talk about more than just movies? Obviously, it hasn't seen a lot of movies, so it couldn't really elaborate on that. But I'm not sure exactly what kind of other topics it's going to cover.
Yeah, what it's done a lot of, I can't imagine. Yeah. The elderly woman, the 82-year-old woman, described Grace as lovely, intelligent, and well-dressed.
Yeah, which I thought was a nice little snark, because the robot obviously doesn't have any clothes on. It's got like the head.
Oh, yeah, you're right, eh?
And then you just got that sort of mechanical body down there.
You're right, it was some snark.
Yeah, it was some snark. She looks at the camera and gives you a look, and if you're just listening to it, it might not pick up the snark as much as When you see her
yeah.
giving the look to the camera. So that kind of takes us into the whole idea of robots, and we've seen robots in manufacturing for many years now.
Yeah.
We have, most of your cars are assembled by robots, whether it's the welding or the painting, and robots in dangerous places that defuse bombs, or, in warehouses will help pick your orders so that you get your stuff same day or next day, depending where you are. And we thought we'd explore a little bit of, robots in popular culture. Not necessarily, we're not going to do a deep dive here into when the first mechanical robot that assembled a car came out. That's a topic for another day. And since we're more into popular culture kind of thing, we're going to talk about robots in popular culture.
Yeah, because when I think about it, I don't recall a time when I was younger when I didn't know what a robot was. Like, it seems to have come up really early, somewhere in the cartoons or the TV shows.
Jetsons.
Actually, the Jetsons, that's right, Rosie, the robot maid. I do know that I won a book in elementary school in grade 1 called The Iron Man that my father read to me at the time. And I looked it up, and it's by a guy called Ted Hughes, published in 1968. But I knew that was a robot, so that was there. Of course, there was the Black Sabbath song by the same name.
Yeah.
Getting on a tangent.
Music? We like music.
Hold on, yeah. So, I don't know about you, but robots have always been with me.
Yeah, robot. It's the kind of thing we saw early on in movies, which we'll talk about a little later. Movies and TV, we saw a lot of it. When I was in high school, we had to read the play RUR, and I brought this up to you, which stood for Rossum's Universal Robots, which apparently is the first coining of the term robot. I think android is older, but the term robot, actual as a word, comes from there. And it was an interesting play. We had to do the play in school. Essentially, these guys build robots, but their robots are more androidy. It's like, they make the body, they make the bones, they make the skin, they make the organs, then they're assembled. So they're more androidy, like human-like, but they're made in a factory. They're assembled as opposed to being born or hatched.
Okay, so a really mechanical-looking robot.
No, these are very human-looking robots.
A very mechanical-looking thing is a robot. A human-looking thing is an android. Then.
Yeah, that's how we tend to look at it, right?
That's how it is, okay.
Yeah. So and in the story here, of course, the robots are there to be the workers kind of thing and eventually revolt and wipe out humanity.
Right.
And this is 1920. 1920.
So they saw it coming, eh?
Yeah. They saw it coming, and then I guess he kind of changed his mind. He writes a book later in 1936, so 16 years later, where they become a servant class, and they kind of work together. I guess he got over his apocalyptic nightmare.
Initial bedwetting terror.
Yeah, maybe he saw the Ford assembly lines and stuff coming and said, maybe I need to change this vision a little bit. It'd be nice if we made him stupid and not being able to take over our world. So yeah, that was interesting. So robots we tend to see as mechanical. They may have some sort of human-like shape. Sometimes think of Robbie the Robot, some of the C-3PO. And we think of androids as being more flesh covered, skin like membranes over them, and have a humanoid appearance and talk in a more natural voice.
So Arnold in the Terminator would have been an android.
I guess he's an android. They called him a cyborg, right?
But I think that's a half human, he's an augmented human, I think, is the cyborg, right?
His exterior is skin, but he's got a cybertronic brain. I should say trademark here, but he's got a computer controlled brain.
Yeah, over a polyalloy battle chassis or something like that, which I always love the sound of.
Oh yeah. So I guess there's all these different definitions of what consists of a robot. A robot's typically a machine that helps you out to either perform tasks you can't do safely, or it can do it more efficiently and quickly at a lower cost, right? Whereas android is a humanoid robot or other artificial being made from a flesh-like material.
Gotcha. Yeah,
exactly. Which in the RUR would be that, and they talk about looms that would spin the fabric that they made the skin from.
Well, he's really ahead of his time. This guy, right?
Yeah.
That was 1920.
Yeah, 1920.
102 years ago. That's amazing.
It's interesting. It's interesting that he went that way as opposed to envisioning a purely mechanical robot made with gears. Think of the Mechanical Turk, right? That people thought was this chess-playing robot that was out a long time ago, which turned out to be a whole fake because there's a small guy inside playing chess.
A small Turk?
Small turkey. And then you get your cyborgs, which are, not the same thing as bionics. Then you get into the whole, what's bionics? Like an augmented arm? Are you a cyborg? Think of the $6 million man, right?
That's what first came to mind.
Better,
yeah.
stronger, faster than he was. Which is a human who has, limbs, a prosthetic that is stronger than it actually, than the original. When we think of cyborgs, it's not the same thing as androids because it's applied to an organism that has restored function or enhanced ability due to the integration of some artificial component. So think of Arnold. Arnold would have been a cyborg. But now,
Right.
how about the T-1000? Is he a T-1000?
No, he's a T-800.
So
the
the
T-1000 is the liquid metal
liquid
Terminator
metal,
from
yeah.
Terminator 2.
So I guess when we cover that later, we can decide whether he's an android or not.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know.
You know what? Arnold can be whatever he wants to be.
Yeah. And then there's this, while I was researching a little bit of these androids, robots, I came across this thing called transhumanism.
Oh?
Yeah, which sounds like a song by Kraftwerk.
Doesn't it? No.
Sorry, that was what was that?
Trans-Europe Express.
Trans-Europe Express.
Trans-Europe Express. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, sadly.
Yes, and they have another great song that we could play on this one, We Are the Robots, which I played for you earlier.
Yeah, okay. Right.
So transhumanism is a movement or a study of how to prolong human life through enhancements.
Fair enough.
Think of, I guess you could see things like artificial hearts could be part of transhumanism where they're helping you to prolong your life, right?
Sure.
And you look at, I'm trying to think of a movie with this in there where you would upload your consciousness to a computer so that you can then pass that consciousness down to a new body. So there was a series on Netflix called Altered Carbon where the idea was basically that. Well, before you would die, you would upload your consciousness and then they would give you a new body, which they called a sleeve. And you could live, in theory, forever by just passing your consciousness onto a new receptacle. And so
a new sleeve. Great term, eh?
Yeah, it's a great term. It's very it's a great term, but at the same time it's so dehumanizing.
Well, that's what's great about it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're just a sleeve.
Yeah, think of I don't know if you've seen in The Simpsons, in Futurama where they have the floating heads.
Never seen it.
The heads inside the little jars. And you could talk to Nixon like hundreds of years later.
Well, having said that, then we got to go back to original series Star Trek, second season. I think the episode was called "Return to Tomorrow," and somehow the Enterprise crew is beamed down to this planet's surface. Maybe the sun is going to go nova. That was always good for a dangerous kind of plot element. And there are three beings there who have long ago transferred their consciousnesses into these glowing globes. And what they're looking for from the Enterprise crew is a chance to feel what it's like to be in a body again. And this whole thing unfolds from that. So Return to Tomorrow, if you like Star Trek original series, that's what that's about.
So that's your different versions of robot-like creatures, robots, androids, cyborgs, transhumanism. From there, you have Isaac Asimov, who came out with the three laws of robotics that legend says he came up with. Some say he came up with it with his publisher at the time when they were talking back and forth, and some other people. And so, Dave, you know the three laws of robotics?
Not off the top of my head, but they're on this piece of paper here. Okay. You said he came up with these in the 1940s, I think, right?
I think so. I think it's the 1940s. Yeah. You see it mentioned.
The 1840s?
Yes, and then he transferred his consciousness.
Well preserved,
into a
block of wood.
So he came up with this. You hear it mentioned in the Foundation series.
Yeah,
and then
I
it's
recall
expanded
that. Yeah.
in his robot series of robot novels. And what's interesting is some other science fiction authors have taken these laws and then modified them a little bit and found ways around them and added to them. So it's nice that this concept, you'd say, well, if we're creating a mechanical robotic creature, how should he be governed? Should he have limitations?
Yeah, it's almost like his morality program, if you will. And I get the sense, or we're going to read through them in a minute, that the three laws are there to provide some kind of comfort to us that the things aren't going to run amok and take over the world and we're going to wind up just being grounded to dust.
Hopefully. So if you look at the three laws, which I'll read in a second, it's the exact opposite of the code of conduct of a CEO.
Let me listen to the three laws based on that.
A robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm.
It's good. I like that.
That's pretty good, right?
Yeah.
Second law, a robot must obey orders given to it by human beings except where such orders would conflict with the first law.
Also excellent.
Yeah. So no hitman robot.
Well thought out.
Yeah. The third law, a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law.
Okay, so we're in the clear basically, right? Yeah, it's not going to wake us up in the middle of the night and beat our head in with its mechanical hand, right?
Or tear your arm off
tear
and beat
my
you to
arm
death with
off,
your arm.
yeah.
At some point in the Foundation series, one of the robots adds a fourth law, which is something like a robot must protect humanity. And the same sort of thing as the first one.
Kind of broadened it though, right?
Yeah, they broadened it a little bit to say, to include humanity as a whole. And that's where I find it interesting that they introduced this zeroth law or fourth law. Zeroth. It's such a weird term. Zero with
Never
a
heard of
TH
it,
in the end. Because, to protect humanity, does that mean that you can then harm a human because you have to protect humanity as a whole? So it's almost like a loophole. Clever lawyer threw that in there to protect its client.
Yeah, a little bit of whistling past the graveyard going on here, I think, eh?
And it's interesting to see some science fiction authors take these laws and then have scenarios where the robots would sort of get around the law through loopholes, right? So if you had a dinner party and you have a friend coming over that is highly allergic to shellfish, let's say, and would die instantly if you serve them something, you could have the robot who does not know the guest, you could have them prepare something that includes the shellfish, serve it to everyone, person dies, robot kills the person.
Didn't know, right.
But didn't know. And Asimov even has a
Did you come up with that one, Richard?
That one's mine, yeah. Always thinking.
Sneaky, yeah.
And even Asimov, in one of his later Foundation stories, has a race of human-like creatures called the Solarians who absorb the sun through them and can power their estates through telekinetic abilities. And they have a series of robots that protect humans, but those robots are trained to understand that humans are people who are Solarians or speak with a Solarian accent. So any other humans who come there are considered intruders.
So they're protecting their own kind as misled by the instructions.
Well, yeah, exactly, because a robot may not injure a human being, but what's a human being?
What's a human being, yeah.
Interesting, like even he, having created laws, found ways around it. Because they're very broad, right? The definitions are not clear. A
very
human
much
being.
so.
This just feels like it would have an addendum or amendments.
Well, given the length of the average Apple contract we have to agree to every time we update our operating system, these do seem admirably brief by comparison.
And what is a human being, right? I mean, it's so abstract because at some point would a cyborg be considered a human being? With a robot say, well, he's part robot, what's the percentage?
And I think that's one, we can get into this later, I think when we look at the different examples of robots in popular culture, the morality aspect is, I think, fascinating, which you're alluding to there.
Yeah, exactly. The whole aspect of what is and what isn't,
Which harkens back to our Lambda, our Google AI, the first episode we did, that theme was in there as well.
Yes, absolutely it was, yeah, because we didn't know whether it was human or not. Or considered, not human at this point, it was sentient.
Yes, sentient.
Yeah.
Which is capable of feeling, I think, if I recall that definition. Yeah, capable of feeling. I don't mean pain, but feeling emotional feelings. So we talked about Isaac Asimov's 3 laws dating back to the 1940s. In 2016, Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella, if I'm pronouncing that name correctly, released 6 laws of AI or artificial intelligence, thinking along the same lines. And these are Satya's 6 laws. Number 1, an AI must be designed to assist humanity, meaning human autonomy needs to be respected. Fair enough?
Yep.
Can't get on our space too much. Law number 2, AI must be transparent, meaning that humans should know and be able to understand how they work. Meet one in a bar, you can tell them apart, let's say. Number 3, AI must maximize efficiencies without destroying the dignity of people.
That's a little odd. That's very
I'm thinking
broad.
that through. Yeah, I'm thinking that through.
That's very broad.
I think I know what he's getting at. Okay, I think I know what he's getting at. We'll get back to it. Law number 4, AI must be designed for intelligent privacy, meaning that it earns trust through guarding their information. 5, AI must have algorithmic accountability so that humans can undo unintended harm. Ooh, it's an odd one.
Yeah, it's an odd one. It almost goes back to, a robot may not injure a human being.
Sounds like these AI can do it.
They have firmware updates.
That has to be it. And finally, AI must guard against bias so that they must not discriminate against people. Well, fair enough. Okay. If we look at the 1946 laws of robotics, much simpler, to your point earlier, much more general, and really seem to be focused on not hurting humans. And these are, a very 2016 list of laws for an AI, which would be the governing intelligence in a robot or an android, I think, if I'm getting the terminology correct.
Yes.
Like the body is the robot, and then the intelligence is the AI, is the brain power of the robot.
And I think at this point, AI is not, when we're looking at it in 2016, we're not necessarily thinking of like a walking robot, but we have AIs now in our phones, in our
Right,
cameras,
right.
everywhere.
Yeah.
And so these are
Customer service centers.
exact chatbots. And anytime you interact with a chatbot on a website, it's an AI.
So interesting. There's a lot more, it seems. There's some moral questions in here. Maximize efficiencies without destroying the dignity of people. I think that's getting at not taking away people's ability to do work that's meaningful through the over-maximization of an operation. I'm not sure if I said that well or not, but I think that's one of the overriding issues with robotics, for me anyways, and AIs, is they encroach upon human activities. It was always supposed to be, it seems to me, in the science fiction, kind of stories, that these AIs, these robots, these machines would liberate mankind from doing meaningless tasks or
Menial
mundane,
tasks, yeah.
menial, mundane tasks. The problem is that's how a lot of people earn their living.
That's right.
Let's face it. And again, maybe mundane is not even correct. I mean, they're talking right now actively about replacing long-haul drivers with an AI. So what are all the people who currently earn their living as long-haul truckers supposed to do once that passes through? And I don't see that anybody's giving that any thought. Mm-hmm. So we liberate on an ongoing basis, maximizing efficiency theoretically, because your AI or your robot doesn't have the same needs as a human. Don't need an HR department anymore. No downtime, never sick, whatever. But a bunch of people don't have any work to do anymore. And there's the dignity. So I think that's what he's getting at.
There's a science fiction author who wrote a book called With Folded Hands, where the robots have taken over all the tasks of humanity. Anything that's deemed dangerous for humans, the robots have taken over. And at the end, as the title suggests, humans have nothing left to do because the robots, in their overarching plan, is to help out humanity, have taken over everything. And so all the humans can do is basically sit with folded hands. And
it's like overparenting, basically.
Yeah, you're taking everything away from them. There's nothing left to do.
Well, if you think of the Jetsons, the Hanna-Barbera series from the early 60s that came out at the same time as the Flintstones, but was set in the future as opposed to the past, you can see that George Jetson, he has nothing to do. And that's kind of the joke there, right? Like, his job is to push a button every now and then.
Just
and
like
he gets
Homer.
exhausted doing it, like Homer, yeah. And he gets exhausted doing it.
See, I was picturing a robot, shuffling cards and telling you that he does it better than you. You suck.
Well, you might have it there. That might be it.
So the bias one I think is interesting, and AI must guard against bias because Microsoft had. We talked about this during the our first episode, the Google AI. Microsoft had developed a chatbot that would go online and within matter of days, weeks, whatever, had become very radicalized.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Just by interacting with people had become radicalized. And so I think that law is in there to guard against that, to make sure, you maintain a...
that makes sense.
Other than that, I mean, I kind of make... They're a little bit ambiguous as opposed to the three laws of robotics, which are actually... Those are even more ambiguous because there's just a lot of things aren't defined.
But when you think about it, I'm looking at it now, and it's almost like in the first one that the AI must assist humanity, meaning human autonomy needs to be respected, and yet it seems to me that the whole point of robots is to remove our autonomy in a sense and do stuff for us. There's a contradiction there.
There can be if your autonomy is taken away without your consent. But if you're asking the robot to vacuum, it's not taking away your autonomy. But if it's decided that this robot will now live with you, mandated, and will do these tasks, then it's taken away your autonomy.
Yeah, okay, I see what you mean, yeah. So there's a third set of laws here, which are Tilden's laws of robotics. Richard?
Yeah, so Mark W. Tilden was a robotics physicist who was a pioneer in developing simple robotics. So his three guiding principles, which I find a little bit scary, are a robot must protect its existence at all costs.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah. Think of hell.
Yeah.
A robot must obtain and maintain access to its own power source. Okay. A robot must continually search for better power sources. It's a lot of... Did he have shares in the electrical company?
Yeah, you get the impression, eh?
Yeah.
It must be able to maintain its own life systems so it can protect itself at all costs. Yeah, I don't like this guy, Tilden. Tilden worries me. I'm not feeling good here.
There's a little thing here. It says, what is notable in these three laws is that these are basically rules for wildlife. So in essence, what Tilden stated is that what he wanted was proctoring a silicon species into sentience, but with full control over the specs, not plant, not animal, something else.
What the fuck does that mean? I understand the individual words, but the combination is eluding me. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, it's a little weird, and I find that first one, a robot must protect its existence at all costs, is odd. It comes through in a lot of other science fiction authors' variations of the laws, where the robot has to protect its existence.
Right.
But usually they add, but not at the cost. Well, it's there. It's in the third law, right? The third must protect it as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law.
Yeah, Star Trek again had one of those. I love the original Star Trek. The robot Nomad, the changeling, came on board, and it had gotten scrambled because it smashed into something else in deep space, and it had gone from protecting humanity, I think it was, to protecting itself. Its programming got scrambled, and so its prime directive was to protect itself. And Kirk and Spock had to talk it out of it, which they always were able to do in the final 10 minutes.
A lot of talking.
A lot of talking, yeah. They just out-reasoned it.
They out-reasoned the broken robot.
Yes.
So from the laws, I guess now we will go into our favorite thing is the actual robots.
Yeah, the robots themselves. And they are aplenty, are they not?
Well,
like when we talked about doing this episode, I open a Word document, and I think in about 5 minutes I had easily like 15. Well, they all came like popping into my head. Yeah. You know, I wound up with like 20, 21 or 22, and I think you have a similar list.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was wild. I mean, we're close to the same age, so our lists done independently. We didn't say we were making lists, but when I upload, I said, Dave, I put up a list, and you look at it, you go, I just made one too, and it's almost exactly the same. So if you were to do a search on the Wikipedia of robots, it's insane, the list. I mean, it goes way back before the 1900s of mentions of robot-like creatures, going back hundreds and thousands of years. Yeah, it's pretty wild. A list of fictional robots. Yeah, it's quite an extensive list going back 19th century and earlier. Here we have 600 BC as mentions of these.
Wow, that's advanced, eh?
Talking bronze and clay statues coming to life, having a regular occurrence in the works of classic authors such as Homer, Plato, Pindar.
Well, you know what? I can see them imagining. I can imagine somebody from that time frame looking at a statue and imagining it coming to life. So that makes sense.
Yeah, and I guess that would be. I mean, it's early for us. We would see it as a robot. For them, they would see it as a statue coming to life.
Yeah.
So we're gonna start with a movie that I saw when it was re-released, I think in the early 2000s, I think it was, which was Metropolis. Yeah, Metropolis, the 1927, I guess, masterpiece.
I think it's considered to be a science fiction masterpiece.
Yeah. And I saw this in theater with, I think, my two brothers. We went to Cinema 5. To go see
Cinema
this.
5, good times, eh?
Yeah, we had gone to see the movie, and it's an odd movie. It feels very much of the era of Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times a little bit.
That's 1927, you said?
Yeah.
It's German, right?
Yes.
So made in the interwar years during the Weimar Republic before, who came to power?
Voldemort?
Yeah, Voldemort. Yeah, that's it, yeah.
There's a story there of someone creating a robot who gives it the same likeness as someone he has a thing for, Maria. Interesting story there with the did you end up watching it?
Here's the thing. I found it on YouTube. Mm-hmm. So I've bookmarked the film. Yeah. I watched about 15, 20 minutes. This week got kind of hectic and I couldn't follow through with it. But now that I know it's there, I fully intend to. I thought I was going to have to order it like a Criterion Collection DVD or something. But so anybody out there wants to watch an early science fiction masterpiece, it's there. Just put in the name Metropolis, Fritz Lang, and you'll get it.
Yeah, we're including it here, although I saw it a long time ago. I didn't do a rewatch for this, but just because it seems to be the first, in terms of movies anyways, it's the first apparition, if you want, of a robot in popular culture.
Yeah, and it's a striking looking robot. In fact, that visual appears on an album cover for a band I loved in the late 70s called Bebop Deluxe.
Oh, that's right.
And I had the album, but it's a live album called Live in the Air Age. I bought it at the time, and there was this, I didn't know what it was, but there's this, black and white robotic creature. I assumed it was just the album graphics. Some years later, I realized it was from Metropolis. I don't recall when I made the connection, but there it was, Yeah. So it's a cool, you've probably seen it, listeners. It's a cool looking robot.
Yeah, it's a cool and definitely a female robot
but
from the look. Yeah,
yes.
I mean, it's
very shapely.
Very shapely. So yeah, because some of the robots we see later on are, they may have, male names, but are ambiguous in their construction, if you want.
May I throw out a candidate?
Sure.
Gort. From the Day the Earth Stood Still from 1951. This is one of those early science fiction classics where an alien being, Klaatu is his name, lands in Washington, I believe, and he's got a robot with him called Gort. Now, Gort is capable of destroying all of mankind with some kind of heat beam he can beam out of his helmet, And he looks like a man, very simple. They couldn't make complicated costumes. So he's extremely streamlined, very 50s looking. He's the silent enforcer for Klaatu.
Yeah, that's
who kind of looks like a weenie, like a skinny weenie.
Yeah, he does. Yeah. And, Gort has a little bit of that look that you would see later on in the 70s Battlestar Galactica, like the Cylons. With the slit in the helmet. It's like a steel helmet with a slit in it, and the eyeballs would go across.
Yeah,
and here his laser.
What was his name in Star Trek? Geordi, right?
Geordi, yeah.
Yeah, kind of almost had that look a bit, sort of thing, right?
Yeah, except Geordi was just glasses, whereas Gort has a full helmet with a little slit across the top, to like an archer slit in the castle. Except here he shoots lasers.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Lasers or a heat beam. So there was also a remake of The Day the Earth Stood Still.
Have you watched it?
No, I haven't seen it with Keanu Reeves.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and they changed the story a little bit.
It was the day the Earth slowed down or something, maybe?
No, not quite, but I haven't seen it. But Gort is one of the early, so we're going 51 here. I'm sure there was plenty of other robots, but I mean,
no doubt.
Popular robots, these are the big names.
These are the big guys, eh?
The big guys, exactly. And then if we go to big guy, we have Robbie the Robot.
Robbie the Robot. You all know Robbie the Robot. Even if you don't think you do, you do.
So where do we know Robbie the Robot from?
Because he looks like the Michelin Tire Man, sort of.
Yeah, he's got those funny arms.
Exactly, the funny arms.
With little clamps on
Little clamps on the end, exactly.
Yeah.
From the movie Forbidden Planet in 1956, a must-see, science fiction fans or not. And as you watch it, know that it was the movie from which Gene Roddenberry derived the inspiration for Star Trek.
Oh, was it?
You can see it there.
Okay.
It's like he saw that when I can make a series out of this. It's a terrific movie.
I may have seen it. I don't have memory of seeing it, but I may have. But you say the robot was repurposed later.
Yes, he was. He reappeared in
Lost in
Space. So like someone found him lying around the prop closet, somewhere.
Yeah. Probably the guy who's in it. He's like, come on, I got to convince these guys to use me again. What the hell am I going to do? I'm a one-trick robot.
Been in here for 8 years. I'm really hungry. It smells badly in here.
Yeah. So you would know him from Lost in Space, Danger, Robinson Danger, with the arms that never seemed to really be useful. They were always flapping up in the air and had those, like I said, those weird little clampers.
It's like a clamp, like a C-clamp sort of thing, right?
Which reminds me of the robots in Futurama. There's an enforcer robot.
Which I haven't seen.
Whose main threat is always, you want, I should clamp you.
Is that what he says?
He's always threatening to clamp. He's like an Italian robot. You want, I should clamp you. And that's his thing. And whenever he says that, I picture Robbie the Robot with his little arms flapping, trying to clamp you with those little.
That's a good imitation you're doing there, the arm flapping.
With the arm flapping.
I really got it.
I wish you could see it. Maybe if we ever do a YouTube.
But it's excellent.
So from Robbie the Robot, we go to our favorite science fiction cartoon when we were growing up, I guess. The Jetsons.
The Jetsons, as mentioned earlier, absolutely. Yeah. And the Jetsons had Rosie. So from Robbie to Rosie the Robot.
Yeah.
And she was a maid, wore a nice little maid costume, a little frilly apron. She's an XP 500 model, and they got her from You Rent a Maid.
So they didn't own the robot. It was a rental service. She
was a rental. Rosie was a rental. So it'd be Rosie the rental robot.
Rosie the rental robot.
Yeah,
really?
She was kind of she did more than housework. I think sometimes she could actually help out to resolve conflict in the family. She was like this steadying force.
Yeah, I think she babysat and maybe helped with homework.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
and it's
that's right.
It was an interesting choice that they gave her the little maid outfit. I guess to define her role, because if she didn't have the outfit, she would just be a robot. Yeah, right. So you need to define your role. So you're wearing that.
She always had a duster in her hand, I think. So a feather duster, right? She was always dusting.
Yeah, always dusting. You'd figure by that time we would have eliminated dust.
You would have thought, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, flying cars and no dust.
And no dust. Yeah, that's something science really should be working on, it seems to me.
Yeah. Again, Elon.
Yeah, exactly. Chief Twit.
Get on it.
Get on it, baby.
Eliminate the dust. So then you mentioned here the robots from What a Little Girl's Made Of from Star Trek.
Yeah, season 1, that's right. This is an episode where Nurse Christine Chapel goes down to the planet's surface with the landing party, which was unusual because an old boyfriend of hers, Roger Corby, is part of, who is a scientist, is on this planet. And it turns out that he has created androids that, wind up menacing the Enterprise. And Kirk winds up being turned into an android, which is kind of fun. And there's a really kind of like, of course, a good-looking girl android there. Her and Kirk are, of course, attracted to one another. That always happened.
So Kirk was attracted to
to an android. That's right. It apparently didn't seem to matter.
Kirk played the field.
He played the field. And she was wearing a very fetching costume, and he just couldn't help himself.
Yeah, I think so. I think if the feather duster looked at him wantingly.
Yeah, I know.
And then we moved to one of my favorite TV shows growing up as a kid. And I remember this would play on TV around supper time. And my brother had a little TV in his room, and he was able to go watch it in his room. But I couldn't always watch it, and this was Get Smart.
Oh, I love Get Smart.
Oh, yeah.
It's so drilled into my mind, eh? Like the opening credits, too, where he's walking through all the gates and he disappears down the telephone booth and all that stuff, like the cone of silence and chaos and all that stuff. It's fantastic.
Chaos. The talking shoe.
The talking shoe, the shoe phone.
The shoe phone, exactly, yeah.
And the robot, Jaime.
Who came on a little later. I don't think he's in the first season.
Maybe not. Yeah, and he was only in there a few times. So he's a control agent. Notable for the fact that he takes things Max says literally. Like if Max says, Jaime, give me a hand, Jaime will unscrew his hand and give it to Max.
Yeah, which was the type of joke you would have on there.
It was the type of joke. It was a Buck Henry type joke. Yeah.
And so he had a feature where he could take photos, right? I think if he touched his nose,
I think you're right.
A print would come out of his jacket pocket, like his breast, his lapel pocket.
Yeah, that's a good idea, actually.
That's a neat feature, right? It's like a Polaroid in your pocket. Could have been a line for a Polaroid there.
Worth noting, it occurs to me now that so far, all of the robots we've discussed are basically friendly, good. Like they're not dangerous robots, right?
Well, I guess you could say
they're helper robots.
They're helper robots. You have Gort, who could be a threat, right?
That's true. Could be a threat. Sorry, you're right. Gort, yeah.
And, assesses his dominance early on by melting all their weapons or making them disappear when they first shoot him. Because they shoot Klaatu, right? At the beginning, superficial wound.
Yeah, he heats up their weapons and they have to drop their weapons. You're right.
But you're right. The other ones are all helper robots, friendly robots.
Yeah, not terrifying.
Same thing when you get into Huey, Louie, and Dewey from Silent Running, right?
That's right. Yeah, the little helper robots, which were the inspiration for R2-D2. We covered this in one of our earlier episodes, and notable for the fact that the director, Douglas Trumbull, created these little guys by hiring legless actors and putting them in the suits. And as a result of that, these little robots could make human-like movements, naturally because there was humans in them, but again, legless humans.
It gave them almost a personality.
Yes, it did. Thank you. Well said. Yeah, I started to lock up there. I had brain lock.
Around that time, I think we have the Stepford Wives also that comes out, or that's a little later?
No, right? I think you're about there. I think it's maybe 1975, Stepford Wives.
And I remember seeing this on TV. You're right, you nailed it. It's 75. So based on a book and interesting story where this couple moved to this small town where all the women seem to be very docile and demure and obedient, subservient.
You've got it. Demure, obedient, subservient. Exactly.
And the main character, I believe, she's a photographer.
That's right,
and she starts to question, her and her friends start to question what's going on.
She's like an independent woman, and she's very, energetic. Yeah.
That's right. And one of their friends, played by Tina Louise.
Oh, Tina Louise is in it. I remember that now.
From Ginger from
Gilligan's Island.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
She's one of their friends, goes away for a weekend, comes back, and she's completely changed. And they start to investigate what's going on.
Right.
And eventually, by the end of the movie, they come to the realization that the women are being replaced by identical robots.
And who's doing this?
The men.
The men.
The men who have their I guess it's weekly meetings at some sort of club where they get together.
Right.
You can imagine cigars, poker, scotch, or whatever going on, and saying, my wife asked me a question the other day when I was trying to nod off. I can't have that. And so they create a race of identical robots, and the movie ends with a scene where she's at the grocery store, and you realize that she's also been replaced by a robot.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So the lead character is also replaced, right?
Yeah.
So a very 70s message, because they're like obviously the women's movement was very powerful and gaining steam in the early to mid 70s. So this would have been a real eye-opening type subject.
Yeah. So here you start to see the shift a little bit in robots from, although the robot is benevolent, its creator is not. Is introducing a robot to take away free-thinking women from the equation here. So we're starting to see a shift. Now, robots are not necessarily all... There was movies before this with bad robots, I'm sure. But in the big popular culture movies, this is where a shift starts to happen.
Well, there is one, actually, and I'm glad you brought that up because around the same time, the movie Westworld was released.
Yes.
And in Westworld, a movie I've always loved. In fact, I even read the book. I think it's a Michael Crichton book, and I think I read it at the time.
It is, yeah.
And in Westworld, in this future society, you can sign yourself into a theme park. Think of Disney World, but you can go to Westworld, Roman world, medieval world. And once you're inside the world of the park, all of the beings you interact with are robots, indistinguishable from human beings. So androids in this case. And if you're in Westworld, you can shoot up the other androids and actually get into gun battles. You can be intimate with robots in Westworld if you so desire. If you're in medieval world, sword battles, etc., etc. And the famous android that comes out of this movie is Yul Brynner playing the gunslinger, who winds up tracking or relentlessly pursuing in a very Terminator-like fashion, almost like a presaging of Terminator, the main character.
Yeah, I remember seeing the movie as a kid, and it was fascinating, the idea of it. And then around the same time, you have Fantasy Island, right? So we're coming to this part where you're like, life is boring. I would like to shoot people. Where can I go? And they create these kind of places where you can live out. It was to live out your fantasies or your dreams. But, some of them had a little more esoteric dreams, if you want, or violent dreams, right?
That's an excellent connection, actually. Yeah.
So, it's like the 70s was an era where you were hoping to, I don't know, were you trying to channel a different consciousness, a different way of seeing things? I want to be, like you wanted to fight the gunslinger. The idea, was it to be the fastest or was it to kill? So Fantasy Island had a slightly more lighthearted take on it, although as they got onto it a little later, there was the devil that appeared.
It wasn't not a show I watched, but I was very aware of it. It was very much in the popular culture at the time. And it's worth noting the Westworld came back as a series, a long-form series in 2016, which I would recommend anybody watch. It's just terrific. And it takes that initial idea, expands it, uses, obviously current state-of-the-art special effects, although they didn't really appear to be missing in the earlier Westworld. They didn't base it around that, but it's so well done. A lovely, long form watch.
So from Westworld, we get into what are probably some of the most popular robots in the world. The Amazon robots. No, sorry, not...
You had me scared there for a minute.
Dave, what big movie came out in 77?
77, let's see. The droids of Star Wars, C-3PO, who always annoyed me, and R2-D2, and that's the end of part 1. Next Tuesday, part 2 drops on Semi-Retired. You won't want to miss it.